tools the bank has for dealing with these are ones that they've been working on for a while and will continue to do so, but the more well understood one, or the most common one because it's used by a range of different organizations, is stakeholder analysis. And that basically, as the name suggests, entails taking seriously the inputs of the various different groups that have an interest in, or in some direct or indirect way involved in the production or the assessment of a particular intervention. Now, the role that communications would play in that is helping different groups to be aware of the fact that other groups potentially have similar, or in a more contested sense, but have very different views about what should be done in that particular circumstance. So I think as part of the process of cultivating the views of whoever constitutes those different stakeholder groups, there's a really important role to play there. The more difficult role for a dedicated communications group per se is once we go to the even more micro version of particular groups, because we can't assume that villagers, for example, constitute a singular coherent view of things. Many villagers might have wildly different views on these things, and not just village A versus village B. The elites in a village might have very different views to the everyday folk in that village, and so there can be all sorts of different ways in which when you push the plus button and keep going in further and further, all you see is more and more diversity with regards to how those views are articulated and what constitutes a question and what constitutes an answer. So property, for land management, for example, right? That's a hugely contentious issue for which mining companies, for example, might have one particular view on that. Village elites who stand to make a lot of money from a sale of particular land might have a different view of that again, and regular villagers might have different views again, because they feel like their own elites have sold them out and taken their birthright, or turned something they regard as sacred, like land, into something that's a commodity that's being bought and sold. And so one of the major ways in which our justice work found itself being useful, but also being potentially problematic as well, is that these land issues would keep having such diverse and contentious viewpoints, and thus the legitimacy of the change process is really crucial here, because there's inherently going to be winners and losers out of any resolution of what these different stakeholders say to each other, and merely making those more clear to each other is an important professional due diligence kind of task, so that I am clear about what the mining company's views are, and I'm clear about what the government's views are. So we need to have that for obvious reasons, but the clarity of the views might only serve to intensify either the hostilities or make clear, in fact, the differences rather than the similarities, or just show how big a gap the difference is between what these different stakeholders have to say about these things. So the communications task is then becomes itself a stakeholder because it's part of the medium by which all these views get conveyed, and different views are expressed in ways that some people find legitimate and other ways that aren't. So having nice videos I think is something that's natural for communications professionals, but for oral cultures, the notion that they should sit around a television screen and that should be the legitimate way in which they learn about what other people think about things is just utterly alien to them. So the challenge in the really super hard, complicated challenges is when communications becomes a stakeholder itself, not just a neutral medium through which these different voices get articulated. And in certain countries where official government views are heavily censored or get portrayed in very particular ways, there is no neutrality. Right? There's only there is politics that shrouds any particular communications message. So, but that's that part of the special role that the bank can play in those types of situations, precisely because it's a large and powerful organization, is to do its own due diligence on recognizing that how things are said as much as what is being said matters enormously, and we can't assume that just what appears crystal clear to development professionals who are flying in to do a negotiation is crystal clear to everybody else. And a good organization that takes context seriously, that understands what social institutional analysis really entails, is not just about having 4 different voices and hoping that we can split the difference between all of those and cut a deal. It's recognizing that there may be no cutting to be done at all. There must only be oftentimes a quite contentious back and forth, and may take a long time before anything, years potentially, not just a quick meet in a smoky room and do a deal. It could take a long time for these things to resolve themselves, and lots of apparent failure before progress happens. I mean, all of that needs to be central to how communications people see their job, because if it's seen as this is just us being the neutral voice of our organization and being as clear and compelling and as crisp as we can be, then potentially we're part of the problem, because all we've done is do a really clear, slick job of communicating our own views the ways that make sense to us, but it may or may not make sense to other people.